Hey, this is Coach Jay with Blue 57 in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm with Michael Kennedy and Kat Mollinelli today, and she's in Florida as well. And we're going to talk about the name, image, and likeness. This is part 2 in our series. The Blue 57 is a company where we are a scouting company. We follow approximately 2,000 players in 16 states, primarily southern states, and we track them. And we prospects that are going into college. And today we're going to talk about the name, image, likeness, and we're going to kind of talk about some of the things that are going on with people that have already implemented that system and getting paid for it. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Catherine, and want to hear all about it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so I think we'll just hop off the bat and start about one of the bigger deals that came through, or one of the bigger pieces of news that came through in the past week, which was Quinn Ewers, the top recruit from the class of 2022, quarterback from Texas, announced that he's going to forego his senior year in high school, and instead he's going to attend Ohio State and cash in on some early NIL deals, which I've heard have been upwards of 6 figures, close to $1 million in the first few weeks over there for him. So that's really what we're going to be talking about the first part here, and how that's going to affect recruiting within the next, couple of years with some of these bigger recruits. Because in the past, when you've seen guys like Reggie Bush, Trevor Lawrence, and a couple others, they've had to go their way, do high school, had to wait to the pros to get pro deals and a bunch of endorsements. You kind of think how much money they really could have made back in college. And so we might see this trend with top 10 recruits. In the future coming years. We know that Arch Manning, a couple other guys, big names that already have a lot of traction coming through, are starting to see, every college want them. Well, which college is also going to provide them with the best NIL deal is also going to be starting to think about one of the bigger topics for him. Catherine, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I think what you said was good. I think that is going to be a trend we're going to see. There is another 17-year-old basketball player from North Carolina, Mikey Williams, is doing a similar thing. He's not going to be competing with his school this year. He's going to be playing for an independent basketball team, so he can engage in these deals. And I think, like you said, when there are certain kids with these big names, this is going to be a possibility, because there are certain states and a lot of high schools in general aren't going to let their players do what they're being allowed to do at the college level. So you're going to see some players really starting to think and make the decision, is it worth that extra year if you can get out of high school, or can you start making money now? Especially when it comes to football. I mean, all the risk and injury associated with that sport alone, you get hurt senior year, it's over. So I think you will see it become more popular, and I think that's going to become a key factor when it comes to recruiting and stuff in the future too.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And now you're going to start to see maybe a lot of college coaches take a different philosophy to recruiting. If you know that maybe 3 out of the top 10 guys might just end up foregoing, what's the deal with trying to spend, all that time trying to recruit? Maybe they start spending on a few more guys. Or maybe it might be the other way around, where they might say, hey, we need to spend a little more extra time on these guys. Got to convince them, hey, they should come to us instead of foregoing, maybe 1 or 2 years of high school and losing a potential good year of scouting. So there's going to be a little bit of balance in between that. And I think we're going to see, only a few guys at most each year, because at the same time, if you opt out, there's always someone that can come and take your place, or someone that can rise up the ranks in scouting, and you might lose offers. We haven't seen that, obviously, because we've only known of 2 guys in 2 different sports that have been there, but there could be a huge difference of, opting out for, a few months, get out there early, make your name known, get some NIL deals, to maybe opting out a few years early to try to make a little more extra money. So that'll be the next big thing. And why don't we transition more into some of the more unique deals that we've seen? So I know you had one to talk about with Derek King down at Miami.
Yeah, so that's my school. Our quarterback, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I do. He was offered the $20,000 deal with the college Hunks Moving Junk and then Murphy's Auto Group deal, just to be pretty much an endorser, a spokesman for the brands. And that was almost instantaneous after this had come out. And I think that just shows that I think what a lot of people were expecting to see, certain names that are already prevalent in sports have already been hit with these really big deals. I mean, an incoming Tennessee State basketball player has signed a $2 million deal already, which is crazy money for someone, who's that young. with a tech company. So I think it's like really interesting to see where the money's going and what types of industries are really getting involved. Because it's not just sports related businesses reaching out to these athletes to do deals with them. It's tech, it's restaurants, it's moving companies, it's everything under the sun.
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out one other thing that Derek King did that I thought was really interesting that I hadn't seen anyone else do was he partnered with the Florida Panthers, the local NHL team down in Miami, to do an NIL deal. And I'm assuming this is going to be a little bit of synergy there. Obviously, I'm a big hockey aficionado. I come from Chicago, big hockey town. The Florida Panthers don't particularly draw a big crowd of, young guys from the area of Miami. So when you have a guy like Derek King who can partner with them, you kind of get a little bit of both ways. You start to kind of dip into a market where, hey, Derek King can bring a bunch of new people who may not watch hockey, but he's partnering with them. Maybe he's signing autographs at the stadium. Maybe he's doing some type of promotion there. So now you're producing ticket sales in a different type of sport that's also seeing revenue streams for him, because obviously he'll probably get to partner up with some gear sales. He'll probably get to do some merchandising with them. I mean, the endless possibilities that he's doing is showing 2-3 years down the line that a lot of things that we might not think are feasible today are going to be in about 2 years. And one thing I wanted to just mention regarding, NIL and everything else, kind of put on the back burner here just for a second, but Fanatics just struck a huge card deal with all the professional sports teams. And a lot of these cards are starting to, go up, $10,000, $20,000, up to millions of dollars. And that's going to start going on with college guys. How are they going to start to make their money? Are these guys going to start selling NFTs of themselves, signature trading cards? You got to start to think, these guys really got to be hopping in on the next level of merchandising. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what you just said is probably the biggest takeaway. This can go in a million number of directions. So I think it's almost to the player's advantage right now to be looking for new and different ways to do this. Because if you're the first, that's an advantage. And you can take, you could start your, do your trading cards. You could take this any way you want. And I think the earlier and the sooner, athletes are starting to, recognize these opportunities and move in those directions, I think it'll be most beneficial for them in the long run. And I also want to add, what we've also seen now is, certain companies are doing deals with groups of players from a specific school. So there's a barbecue restaurant in Arkansas that partnered with several of their offensive line members. And then again, similarly, Notre Dame has a similar situation with their offensive line in another restaurant. So you're seeing situations like that where that also makes into the recruiting realm and interest for players, especially when you start to talk about players whose names aren't necessarily recognizable by everyone. I mean, there will always be the big names, and then that's a different class, I think, of NIL deals. And as far as recruiting, and I think when you're some of the biggest names Quinn Ewers, or you had said, his approach to it is different because he was a top recruit and his name's out there. So he his name, image, and likeness is one entity. But then for other players who may not be as recognizable across the country and stuff, deals like this that are tied to a team are going to be really attractive. And I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't say people aren't going to start taking that into consideration when choosing where they want to go to school.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And one thing I also noticed was there's a lot of more we over me mentality. So you see a lot of guys, they might get a huge NIL deal. I believe some of the names were JT Daniel, as we mentioned plenty of times tonight, Derek King. A couple other guys have already mentioned saying that, hey, if I get a big payout from a company or something like that, I'm going to split it with my guys, my teammates, because I'm making sure that everybody's going to get a piece of this because, JT Daniels and guys like that are so great, but they're only as good as the team that's around. In football, we forget, is a team sport. There's around 85 guys on scholarship. So for when you see that type of initiative from guys like that are big names out there, you love to see it because it's really showing the next generation, hey, you might come here with these deals in mind of, I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to take care of my family. But you got to remember that those are the guys that you're, doing 2-a-days with, you're at fall camp, doing off-season workouts with. Those are your brothers, and that's the group you're going to kind of stick with. I don't kind of see how in the future this is going to affect recruiting to the point of we're going to see major shifts. I think we mentioned in the first video, the choice between Iowa and a UCLA. I know we mentioned that before, that a guy might choose a bigger market, but as we've kind of seen over the past few months since it started, a lot of small schools and a lot of local businesses have stepped up to, talk to their players and make sure, hey, we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure you get an NIL deal. I think what it's really going to come down to is how well is that program prepared to get them to go out and meet with those companies. So I think we mentioned a lot last time, with a couple different programs and their stuff. I know NC State had their Ignite program where they had a bunch of companies come in and say, hey, we're looking to do NIL deals. Here's the type of player we're looking for. Gave them a list, met with the player. We're able to kind of broker that midway. So I think that's one thing I would say is going to be in the future too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm glad you brought up that point, because what we're seeing now, which I think a lot of people weren't sure if it was going to go in this direction, it's not necessarily just going to the big markets. And I think at the end of the day, what everyone needs to realize is you're selling your personal brand. So it's your name, your image, your likeness, it's you. So you can go to a small school, and if you have a huge social media presence, for example, that's it. You'll make more money than someone who goes to a bigger school and just isn't out there on the internet, out there in the world, not as well known. I mean, we're seeing that a lot now, especially with like women who are playing less popular sports or at less popular schools. I mean, there are female basketball players at some small schools with millions of TikTok followers, and their brand deals since this has passed have been through the roof. And I think when this conversation about NIL first started, I don't know that everyone was expecting people in like smaller sports and smaller markets to have had the success they're having at this point. And I think that comes back to like a really big key factor that for any athlete looking to take advantage of this is it's your personal brand. And at the end of the day, whatever you do with that, the bigger you make yourself, the more opportunities you're going to have. And we're seeing that come to light, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think now this is the point where we wanted to give some potential recruits or anyone watching this some advice for how to handle NIL with recruiting within the future, because we are at Blue 57, the recruiting edge, trying to make sure we can give everyone a chance to give a step up on their competition. So one piece of advice that I could give for anyone watching this, that whether you're a player, coach, staff member, family member, whatever, is to remember the truest thing that comes out of all of this is you might have a name, image, brand, you might have likeness, stuff like that you can sell, but without being a great football player and without, working on yourself and your personality, you really can't sell that as well. You could have 10 million followers on Instagram, but you could, totally blow off football, totally blow off practices, your friends, your responsibilities, all that. You got to focus up on football. That's the main thing. That's what we're here to do. I know a lot of guys in the NFL have already warned a lot of guys with those NIL deals. Hey, make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. Make sure that you're good with football. You're good with everything else. The company that you're dealing with is a true, tried, respected company, because if an NIL deal ends up imploding on you, something bad happens, you get burned. The consequence isn't probably just going to go on that single player. It's going to go on the team. It's going to go on your name. It's going to go on your family name. So the best thing right now is to just, when you're a recruit, focus on football. The brand deals will come. Obviously, the biggest thing is to just focus on football. Catherine, any advice for the young players out there? Anyone else?
Yeah, like segueing off what you had just said, I think it's also important that once you're like starting to engage in these NIL deals, you have to like take the time to really figure out what these companies are, what they stand for, and does that align with your values? Because once you partner with them, you will be forever tied to that brand. And at 19 or 20 years old, like a deal for 50 grand would be a lot of money, and most people would think that's a no-brainer. I'd take it regardless of what it is. But really, when you're talking about like longevity and down the line, if you're expecting to have a professional career, especially, these things are going to follow you. So I think it's really important just to make sure that you're not just taking any deal that comes across just because the dollar signs look great and it's attractive, but to really think about what you're doing and what you're associating yourself with. And examples of certain players, and like football players, basketball players, that have waited to sign deals and have been really evaluating because they want to focus their brand in a certain direction and make sure everything they're endorsing and doing is really aligned with the brand they're creating for themselves. So I think that's really important to remember as well.
Yeah, and I think that both of us really want to just let players know we're not telling you not to go out and start cultivating a social media following or starting your brand or something like that, even as a high schooler. But just remember that it always takes precedent to your values and who you are as a person, and your football playing abilities firsthand, because that's what's going to carry you through life. That's what's going to carry your reputation. And I think that's just going to be how the future is going to go in the next few years, and we'll see. The NCAA has said they'll release some more revamped list, I believe, within the next year or so regarding what's going to happen with NIL, who you can partner with, who you can't. We already talked about the shorthand list, but we'll see that. Any final thoughts, Catherine?
I would say like one last final piece of advice and just kind of a general statement I want to make is there's a lot of companies now that are specifically specializing in NIL, whether it be companies that are helping you find these deals and make these endorsements, or companies that provide more of the professional side. So whether it be like reviewing contracts, taxes, all that stuff, like there are companies there that are set out with the goal of just helping these young kids really understand what they're doing and understand like the real world implications. I mean, like you're talking about in some cases $1 million deals. I know personally, I would have no idea what to do, how to pay taxes, what I had to sign, what it entailed at my age. So I think it's important that anyone going to do this actually takes the time to seek the proper help. I mean, everyone's there to help you guys with this. It's not like you guys are alone in the dark. Even if you're not sure if like something could, infringe on your eligibility, take the time to reach out to the compliance office, take the time to talk to the appropriate people who are just more specialized in the technicalities of all this stuff, because it can only benefit you in the long run. And you don't want to like put yourself in a position where you unintentionally did something that jeopardizes any part of your future because you just didn't know.
Yeah. My last final thoughts and comments are just making sure that, going off with what you said, that everything is, within the proper restrictions, within the proper guidelines that have been handed out by not only the NCAA, but by your university. It's always good to make sure that you're partnering with respected companies, but that doesn't mean you can't go out on a ledge and take a shot with a brand new company that might just be starting up. Just make sure their values align with yours. And I feel like a lot of guys are going to get really successful off this, and a lot of teams are also going to benefit from this. So that's my final thoughts. And Coach Jay, if you want to come in here and say anything, you're welcome to.
No, you guys did an excellent job. I think those are all great points. And one other thing to think about is, whether it be a name, image, likeness deal or anything like that, when you put your signature on a piece of paper, it doesn't matter what anybody tells you. The only thing that stands when you go to court is what is on the piece of paper. So if you go and you take in a phone and they say, hey, oh, don't worry about what it says on there, that it's a 5-year contract. If you put your signature on it, you just signed up for a 5-year contract. It doesn't matter what the salesperson says, because a contract is a contract between two people. It's a deal. It's in place. So, anytime that you have something like that, when somebody's proposing something to you, you should always take that contract and let somebody else look at it. Clearly, if you're a college athlete, take it to your compliance officer. You don't need to put your name on it. You don't have to walk into a room. You got 30 seconds to sign it. A lease to an apartment, anything like that. You always need to take a look at it. Give yourself 24 hours. You should never walk into a room with somebody for a contract and they just say, hey, here's the deal. This is basically what it says. Sign here. Just don't ever do that. So even if you go into a car dealership and they say, hey, we just need you to sign this before you drive this car, you read everything that's on there at all times. That is a young person mistake. So, I think that's I think you guys made great points. And at the end of the day, everybody is responsible for their own brand. So, you're responsible for your brand. So if you are carrying yourself in an honorable way, you have a better chance of getting better deals and those kind of things. The thing that I'm going to be interested in is seeing how, with some of these players, once they start making larger amounts of money or for the first time, if it changes their style of play. Because a lot of these guys, they're just played uninhibited. They just go out there and play hard, and they're not getting paid $1 million. They're just doing that in high school. They just play, relentless, high energy, high effort. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to some of these guys when their brand becomes big and they're $1 million brand. do they play the game a little bit differently? And I think it'll be interesting to see. The other piece that I think is going to happen is I think that the football stuff, because of the way that all the COVID restrictions, the football people kind of got thrown into this thing. So they didn't get too ramped up on it. So some of the bigger names got to pick up some contracts. But I think when we go into basketball season, the big names are going to pick up some of the name, image, and likeness things. I also think that the once football games go active and live and you see big crowds and stuff like that, I think some of the advertisers are going to come back into play. They're going to realize, oh, wow, they got 80,000 people at that game. They got 100,000 people at that game. I think that some of those advertisers, when they go to their own school's game and they see the crowds and they see, you know, the energy, they're going to be willing to get involved. They hadn't been able to do that for 2 years now. So it'll be interesting to see once the games start how all that kicks in. But I do think it's going to ramp up. So anyway, any thoughts about that?
I think I'm good. Again, just making sure players abide by the guidelines. Like you said, football is the final product, so that's the thing that's going to be represent you the best. So make sure that you take care of yourself, take care of anything that might relate to playing football, you know, injuries, mental health, stuff like that.
I completely agree with what the both of you just said. I think it will be really exciting now that the seasons are coming to begin, and we could like actually see, you know, how is this going to affect the athletes in terms of being athletes. And I think that's probably everyone's biggest question right now. And I think you will see more deals as the season goes on, especially, you know, you might not have been a big name team and then you have one really great game and then your name's everywhere, and then, you know, the next day these deals are coming in. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this unfold in real time.
Well, looking at the Georgia Bulldogs, the 24/7 analysts are saying that they could go undefeated. I can promise you, if Georgia goes undefeated and plays in a national championship game this year, their boosters and the deals are going to come out of the walls. I mean, because there's so many wealthy Atlanta businessmen that are big Georgia fans. So, you know, you're right. If your team's winning, it's gonna the money's gonna flow that way, and that's kind of the way it works in a capitalistic society. So anyway, all right, great reporting, guys. I appreciate it. You guys did a great job. That helps clarify it and gives me a better understanding. So for you guys that want to check us out at blue57.net. We're also on Twitter at blue57_. So check us out, and we're looking forward to the season. See you on the ball field.